Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Ag South Farm Credit. I want to take you back over the last 7 days here and just look at where this precipitation pattern really delivered the heaviest rainfall. And it's pretty clear that it's in parts of the south, right? The lower Mississippi River Valley got hammered, so did parts of kind of the Red River Valley getting into this part of Texas. I mean, just a tremendous amount of rainfall. What was interesting was the position of the high. For most of the early part of last week, it sat right here. And what's critical about that is that's what kept much of Ag South territory. I'm talking about this coastal area right in through here, kind of out of it. We just didn't get the precip. It was all running around the periphery of this. Now, before I go away from this, I'm going to bring you up to speed on some important things. This rainfall that got into the Midwest, melting some of the snow that was in place here, we have really begun to recharge a lot of our soil moisture deficits in this area. The Mississippi River popped back up again. It's now back up to 14 feet above low stage. I mean, it's really been moving around a lot with all of the recent precipitation. But it's important to note that this has been an area that I've been watching for a long time. Just think for all you corn and soybean growers down here, the fact that this winter has been a moisture recovering winter for a central part of the Corn Belt. Now, the Cotton Belt continues to work against its longer term drought issues as well, but we need to assess where we think this upcoming spring and summer is going to go. And I've got brand new long range information here at the very end. All these slides right here at the end are all about the new long range. So I can't wait to kind of get to that in just a few moments. But let's stretch this out over 2 weeks. And again, you can really notice where the really wet conditions have been versus the dry. And I want to make a point that even though we've been drier over the last 2 weeks in this area, overall, the last month, in fact, the whole of this cooler season from November till now has been wetter. We've not seen drought expand in those areas. Where I'm getting concerned is a big section here of the northern plains getting into the Canadian Prairie. That's been an area that's been left out of the flow. And as you're about to see me show you in just a few moments, it's going to continue to get left out of the flow in the near term. But I want to wrap up these stats on precip by getting to this map. It's our last 30 days looking at precipitation ranks by climate district. Now, the fact that the last couple of weeks have been drier are why we see several of these climate reporting districts here on the drier side of average, all right? But still, we talked about this winter being a winter where much of the south and southeast and all of Ag South territory was going to be able to recover from their long-standing drought conditions, and I think we're still going to continue to see that going forward. And like I said, I want to talk about spring and summer just with some preliminary ideas here in just a few moments. The big story over the near term, though, is going to be this, the Pacific Jet. It has extended once again, and it's very fascinating to see the winds going over 200 miles an hour here and then splitting across the west coast. We want to know how this jet is going to reform as it goes toward the mountains. What is it going to be doing as it comes up out of the south? And what will that mean overall, I think, for, just for our moisture and temperature characteristics going forward? So I think the story is still told here. So we're going to look down at the top of the atmosphere, the top of the planet on the North Pole at the upper atmosphere wind. So I'm talking about jet stream level winds about 6 miles above our heads. We're going to play this out. Now, throughout the beginning of this week, there is strong subtropical jet stream flow here, but it is not yet set up to deliver us rain. Okay, we're in the wrong spot of this jet to get flow. You want to be here on the nose of it or here on what we call the right entrance, and we're not. We're just on the northern side. So what we've got is through this week into early weekend time frame here. I'll show you what I think might be coming through. But notice this. By this Friday, February 2nd, kind of a famous day in atmospheric sciences and meteorology, look at this big split in the flow. We're going to have a piece of it run to the south and then this large high over low block. And what I want to do is I want to discuss what that might mean as we think about where this pattern will get to throughout the rest of February. Because as we go into the beginning of February 4th, 5th, 6th, the pattern starts to change. The jet retracts. We have one piece that still comes up like this, and we just need to see if that's enough to really revive moisture, change things around in terms of our temperature and precip once we get past that first full 7 days of the beginning of February. So you know where I'm going with this. This is the big idea. Let's now see what this near-term forecast holds. As it stands, we got here late in the night on Sunday, we have some wind issues still in parts of the Carolinas coming off the Appalachian Mountains into parts of central North Carolina. All of this is still flood down here. We had just truly epic amounts of fog throughout the midsection of the country. In fact, most locations from the Rocky Mountains all the way to the East Coast saw at some point some pretty dense fog this past week. But our all hazards weather map looking a lot cleaner early this week than it did over the last 2 weeks. The temperatures, just got to show you what Monday's going to be here because this is just amazing. We're cooler here still, all right, but I want to show you something. North Dakota, high temperatures will likely crack 50 degrees later today on Monday. If you rewind the clock 12 days, we had wind chills of minus 50, meaning this is a 100-degree swing in the feels-like temperature in the northern plains. Now, I'm going to come back to these temperatures in a few moments here and kind of give us an idea on the north versus the south with respect to this temperature pattern. But before I do that, can I at least show you what to be on the lookout for early this week? Starting off early Monday morning, playing through the day on Monday, getting into Monday evening, Tuesday morning, right there. There's a weak low that's moving over the Great Lakes. Now, what I want to watch with this low is that it is expected to push itself by Tuesday afternoon and evening toward the Appalachian Mountains. Could spread some light snow into parts of Virginia. It doesn't look like a big moisture maker at this point. Just take a look at what it's doing. But maybe as we start talking about Wednesday morning, better chances of some scattered showers across parts of the Carolinas. To see that, though, I got to flip you over to the European model. Let's just play it forward. Let's see that system. There it is. That's the one coming through. There it is, Tuesday night, getting into Wednesday. Now, if you notice on Wednesday, there's some snow in the Blue Ridge. Well, really more just the mountains up here, the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. Light rain trying to move its way through. I'll show you how much in a moment, and then that's out. Okay, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, not a whole lot going on. High pressure builds in Saturday, getting into Sunday, and it's that high pressure that's going to suppress a frontal boundary farther to our south, such that Sunday morning through the day on Sunday, getting to early Monday morning, we got our next chance at bringing in some rainfall. But we told you last week that this time period, this week, was going to be on the drier side of things, with not a whole lot of chances of getting a lot of moisture in there. All the activity is going to be going back to the west as the nose of that long jet comes in. So let's add it all up. We just play through Monday. There's a little push of moisture coming in Tuesday, Wednesday. See it? Not a whole lot. We're going to be measuring this in kind of fractions of an inch, right? So maybe parts of North Carolina get close to an inch here, but overall I don't think very much. So then we got to wait through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There comes that frontal boundary. Notice it? And it could be spreading through parts of southern Georgia into South Carolina. Early next week, a decent chance at a ½ inch to an inch of total precip. It's not a whole lot. You see, what's going on right now throughout this week is that the west is being targeted. And into early next week, we're going to see the same. That's where the nose of that jet will be hitting. It's not us. It's the west. And so the best chances of having highest winds and heaviest rainfall is primarily here. Now, what we will be watching, okay, as we get out there into February, are maybe some better chances into week 2. So let's go have a look at that. First, probability maps. This is the chance at staying under a ½ inch of rain through the 7th of February. So in other words, if you see this, most of Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, we're talking about an area in through here that's got a 50 to 70% chance of not picking up more than a ½ inch, okay? I noticed we had the operational models putting a little bit more in here, but I'll just tell you, not real high probability of getting wet. Now, if we go to the chances of getting more than a ½ inch of rain, now we look like this. It's kind of the complement to it. Who's going to be wettest? The best chance of an inch? It's going to be pretty far to the south. Okay, so let's just keep an eye on that as we play out there from now all the way to the 7th of February. But I did mention this. Getting out there at that time frame, look at this. We have a trough here. There's a large ridge that runs up the middle part of the country and another trough off the coast. And as we let this play forward past the 7th, 8th, and 9th, we do flip that pattern around a bit such that we get better flow like that. Now just remember, flow from this direction, dry. Flow from this direction, a bit wetter. And that's one of the reasons why when we look out there into week 2, we now start to see the drier risks kind of starting to fade a little bit for us. I'm not calling for overly wet conditions to start, the month of February. Kind of got February and start backwards right there for a second. So sorry about that. But anyways, you're just looking at the week 2 precipitation here. And we see it's where the Pacific jet's coming in that's going to make all the difference. Okay, from there, let's talk temperatures again, and then I got to get into this long-range stuff. There's Monday's highs compared to average. Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe better chance of more mild air by Wednesday. Getting into late in the week, Thursday, watch the weekend. Friday, Saturday, that's when some more mild air really starts to pour in as the west cools off. When you look out there, day 5 through 10, we still don't fully break away to the really mild conditions. And the reason for it is there's kind of 2 troughs of low pressure here, and the flow goes around just like that. So we end up getting all the mild air compared to average, smack dab in the center of North America. We just tend to stay closer to average, maybe a little cooler than average here, until you get to day 10 through 15, when that big open ridge starts moving over the Great Lakes. Then we could see some more mild air around here. But overall, I look at that and I go, well, that's not cold. We're not really tucked into some really cold air. It's just, right around average, a few degrees on the cooler side of average. All right. I wanted to get through your next couple of weeks quickly because I don't see, at this point, I'm recording this on Sunday night, I don't see a lot of big time systems rolling through. We're just going to watch the Pacific. And the Pacific is where the story's going to lie. Because right now, the February 10th through February 23rd has taken us back into cooler here, warmer northwest. And you just notice wetter south of that line, drier New England, Great Lakes, Midwest, drier Northwest. Now, what's giving it this look? Because it's not just the government, the CPC that thinks this. It's also the same look from the European model. It's got a bit of a drier signal here, wet. See that same kind of line I just drew with a little drier in the Northwest as well. So that's February as it's currently shaping up by the models. And I could show you the GFS extended, European extended, they all have the same thing, and it agrees with what the government said. So what's going on here, and what is this pattern really hinged on? It's hinging on this, the Madden-Julian oscillation, the MJO. It's right now tucked away in phases 6 and 7. And here's the gamble we're taking with this. If it stays here, then the likelihood of what I'm about to share with you and what I just shared with you stays pretty high probability. Like, good chance it'll stay that way. Where could we go wrong? If it pops out into phase 8-1, really pops out into phase 8-1, throw the whole pattern out the window. Take us back over to much more active. Bring in much more chances of colder air. But the models are saying, leave it. And what that does is gives us this. Did you just see me draw that? Trough here, trough there, flow goes around it. We just seem to get a lot of that if we stay in phase 6 in February. Or if we get into phase 7, there's troughs that flank North America, but kind of more boring flow across North America. Now, just putting this all into context, that's what the MJO is doing. We think it's going to ride over the top of El Nino, which we know has peaked and is beginning to fade slowly. Now, I want to do two things with you with this. The first thing I want to do is I want to go look at the month of February, and I want to just see what happened every single time going back to 1950 that we had an El Nino event. I'm going to use them all of these El Nino events here, all of them, all of the big ones that you got up here. I'm going to put them all together and make a composite image out of it. Now, here's an interesting thing. I just told you that the MJO is trying to get stuck right here in phase 7 and not necessarily move over into phase 8. In all of those years, it did want to move over to phase 8. In fact, it even wanted to come over to phase 1 and do a reset. Now, that being the case, what I want to share with you is this is what also happened. The jet dipped into a trough here, a broad trough coming through the southeast. It tried to split and go up over a big ridge here. And if this is what happens in February, those first 7 days I just showed you will not look like the following 22 days. It will look much different. We will likely get into a scenario that'll get cranking with the subtropical jet and introduce some colder air. Let me show what I mean. You see those same Februarys here, all those years. The blues represent composite where it was wet. See that? And then in addition to that, it was cool. So I just told you we have a relatively boring start to February. If we just said El Nino and February, we'd go colder and very active. Okay, that's the story. Now, is that what our government's saying? It is, actually. I showed you their week 3, week 4. But what about their whole outlook for February? You see, they've got the cooler chances down here, mild north. Well, that certainly lines up with this, mild north, cool south. And then they've got wet, California, near normal, south. Driest conditions are Ohio Valley, Midwest, Great Lakes, wet for us. And that lines up here too, doesn't it? See, wet, wet, drier. So what I'm trying to say here is that if El Nino is the dominant factor and the MJO just slides a little bit farther than currently projected, then we get into this at some point in February and we have another time period of where we're talking about winter conditions across the whole country for a while. Now, we're days away from talking about this. This is 10 to 12 days out, but it's something at least to be thinking about as we go forward. Now, speaking of going forward, let's just keep going. How about March through April? I'm going to use those same years. And March through April tend to have a deep, low pressure cell in the mid levels of the atmosphere in the Bering Sea, and another one right here over the southeast. The southwest. Now, I said that thinking about the southeast because if you end up getting low pressure here and flow coming around it, this can at times really set us up with a very, very active early season severe weather setup. And it's also the type that's got a high to the north and a low over the south. And that just tends to push the subtropical jet even farther to the south, making it more of a component. Now, why I'm thinking about this is because the February, March, and April outlook from the European model, which we'll get a new one of these on February 5th, still has us over here on the wetter side of average, the more active side of things. And I'm just thinking that this may be met with a lot of early season severe weather, especially once we get into March and in the month of April. That's also echoed by the longer range outlook from the IRI multi-model probability group. See, it's still also got this area over wet. Now, what about going beyond that? Well, let's do this two different ways. I want to now make a different stab at the longer range. I've told you that I think that the El Nino is going to fade slowly, right? But we need to play this game of what if. What if it comes off of this peak, which it just did, and it crashes all the way by October to be a similar strength La Nina as we just finished El Nino. Now, given that, I'm going to go back to these years and find every time that happened. And those years were 1973. They were 1983. We had 1988 did that. We had 98 that did that. We also had 2010 that did that, and 2016 did that. And we're here and we're wondering if it's going to do that. So I'm going to use just those years. Now, what happened in those years? Well, this is what May through June looked like. And I'm going to tell you, this is just one stab at it. May through June tended to have troughs here. So the flow came around and popped out. And that's why I think this isn't May. This is March to June, all of spring. That's why I'm on the lookout for the risk of the severe weather. Because when you got into June to September, the jet stream tended to do something like this, building and ridging here. In fact, this ridging tended to sit at times over parts of New England and at other times over like parts of West Virginia. And if I think about it sitting there, the risk I start to see develop is maybe June to September, after a very active spring, has a bit of a drier risk. See that? That's what's now showing up. Very active here. Why? Because there's low pressure systems coming out and we just fire off the storms. But this is suggesting drier if El Nino's the dominant thing June to September. I'm just making a point here. This is not an exact forecast. It's just a look out there. And what does it also do? It says, hey, maybe we're a bit more mild in this area. Cooler compared to average here in the west, more mild as you get over here across much of this side of the country. So what I'm trying to tell you right now is if we just use those years where there's a rapid collapse of El Nino, they are not overly favorable for us in this growing season. Whoops, they're not. They tend to be hotter and they tend to be drier. So is it a good estimate to say that it's going to crash really hard like that? I don't think it is. I think we're going to be doing something a bit more like this. I think it's overshooting. And the reason I bring that up is because it's not just because it gives a more favorable forecast, but this is what the models are doing. This is March, April, May. Again, it doesn't matter what El Nino speed at which it collapses. It's still going to be an active early spring severe weather season. Please start preparing for that now. But you see April, May, June, July, where's the dryness? It's not showing up yet. In the European models, they're much slower to drop off the El Nino event. And even if we look at it statistically and just jump out here, March, April, May, June, and May, June, July, you don't see the statistical model tossing in drought. So what I just did for you was to just play a game to say, if it crashes hard, what do we expect? And that's where we start to run that risk of being hotter and drier this summer. But what are the true indicators that it's going to crash real hard? I don't think there are very many of them. So I just wanted to present the case and let you kind of decide with me as we watch this over the next several months. I want to finish with a bit on the globe. Over the next 10 days, you saw the pattern. It's doing that. It's highly amplified, big ridge. That's where all the heat is. Notice Europe, Russia, very mild. Argentina, very mild. Center part of Australia, very mild. All the coldest air in the northern hemisphere is in Greenland and it's in Alaska. Now, the precipitation side of it, let's look globally. We're drier across southern Europe, wetter across this part of northern Europe, getting into Ukraine and Russia. We see a tropical system going through northern parts of like Queensland, for example. Wet conditions continue throughout much of China. But the dryness that's coming into parts of Argentina, remember, Argentina is having one of its best growing seasons on record, incredible rains. I'm not worried about the heat and dryness that's coming in right now. What is interesting is that we look here across northern Brazil, still see a little bit of a wet signal, but this is not the kind of wet that would have me tell you watch for major slowdowns in harvest. So at this point, I can't look at the map across South America and see just a whole lot of stress here from this particular pattern. But it is going to get hotter across the south, so we need to just watch that carefully. But with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Tell you all to have a great week, and I'll pick up again next Monday. Thanks.